All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Bring Them Back, Reverse Scholarship Model in Practice. My name is Andrea Judd, and I'm a Program Coordinator at the Council of Michigan Foundations. We'd like to welcome everyone to the call today. This program was developed in partnership with our TriState group, which is a partnership of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. But we'd like to welcome, we know we have a number of participants from all across the nation today. So we welcome you all and thank you for taking your time to participate. Before we jump into the content today, I did want to share just a few notes. If you're having any technical trouble, we do encourage you to call ReadyTalk directly. That's the platform that is used for this webinar, and they can help you get connected. Their number is 800-843-9166, or you can reach them at help@readytalk.com. Because we do have a number of participants today, everyone is muted, which means that you can hear us, but we can't hear you. So we encourage you to use the chat box on the lower left-hand side of your screen to ask questions. If you're having any trouble hearing or anything like that, you can put that in the chat there, and I will respond and read all of those questions when we get to Q&A to our presenters. Before I introduce you to today's presenters, we were interested in knowing where everyone is in the process. So this is the second webinar in this series on the reverse scholarship model, but we know that this might be the first time many of you are hearing about this. So if you could just respond to the survey, just telling us where you are in the process, whether you're just here to learn more, whether you're taking the first few steps or maybe exploring a little bit more about it, or if you started with implementation, really going out, using the manual and seeking out some of that information. So we'll just give a few more moments to respond. Okay, great. So it looks like most of the participants today are just here to learn more. So the presenters will keep that in mind as they're sharing information, and I do have some resources that I can direct you to, which I will talk about at the end of this webinar. However, today we have two really great presenters that are going to share their experiences with you about the reverse scholarship model. So first we'll be hearing from Randy, President and CEO of the Community Foundation of St. Clair County. Randy has been with the Community Foundation since 2002, and he was previously the Director of an Education Foundation in Metro Detroit, where he oversaw grant programs targeting engineering education at colleges and universities throughout North America. He is a graduate of Eastern Michigan University, and he began his career in nonprofit management in 1990 when he joined the staff of the Michigan Art Train in Ann Arbor. He also spent several years with the American Heart Association until he took his first foundation job in 1997. Randy is also a speaker on many Council of Michigan Foundation programs, and we appreciate the expertise that he's able to bring to his peers. Also joining us today is Lisa from the Community Foundation of Crawford County. Lisa became the president of the foundation in June of 2014, and she has a vast experience in fundraising and managing large organizations that serve the public, including the American Heart Association, the American Red Cross, and the American Cancer Society, and the United Way. Lisa is always happy to speak with individuals or groups on various ways of supporting the foundation, as well as answering any questions about applications. So Randy and Lisa will be joining us, and we will also be joined, and Randy will introduce her later when she is on the call, by a recipient of one of these scholarships. So really looking forward to hearing more about that. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Randy.
Thanks, Andrea. So one thing you'll notice right off the bat, We have modified the name of our program over the last few years, and it's now just called the Come Home Program. But it did start out as the Reverse Scholarship Program. We had that name in the beginning. We switched it in year 2 to the Come Home Reverse Scholarship Program. But now in year 3, it's just called the Come Home Program. And all of our application details on our website, you can check those out whenever you like. So, and I'm glad we did that survey today. It's helpful to see where people are at. So I'll give you a little bit of perspective. And most importantly, what I tell people is don't overthink the program too much. At its heart, it really is just a back-end competitive scholarship managed by our scholarship department, much the way you would manage any of your normal scholarship programs. So it really is just a competitive back-end scholarship program where we've tweaked or adjusted the terms and conditions and criteria. At its core, it's basically a financial incentive. It pays recent college graduates up to $15,000 to move back home to live and work. And there's some key technicalities I'll get into there, including what does the word recent mean, and move back home to live and work. There's some legal hurdles you really have to consider before you go too far. But that's what it is, a back-end scholarship, pays college grads to move home. It's really, though, this is an economic stimulus program. This is, at its heart, this is not about college education. It really isn't even about student debt. It's about how does a community foundation play a role in economic growth and prosperity using the tools and resources we have available to us. And this was one more tool in our toolbox that allows our foundation to play a role in our region in the areas of economic growth and prosperity. And it's a place where we are now accepted in this narrative around economic growth and prosperity because we're bringing something to the table. Just to give you an idea of how our region has reacted and how we've been careful to craft the message, this was a headline from late 2016, a few months after we had launched the program. This was the front page of a newspaper article in our region, and it really captures what we were trying to message. And what we really liked about this headline is it said that the foundation continues efforts to boost economic growth. This has really opened new doors for us, new doors with people who turned out to be donors, new doors with the industry, with business, with our chambers, with our economic development people. They now accept us in the space of economic development, and this program really helped drive that home. So as I said, we're now in year 3 of this. We gave out 3 awards in 2016, 4 in 2017, 1 so far this year. I will say we accept applications year-round. There is not a scholarship season like most of us have traditionally, and that's in part because if you think about the audience, there's not a set time of the year when the audience for this award may decide they're ready to move back home. One of the things that's different about a Come Home Reverse Scholarship Program is we do not write a check up front. You don't get all your money in advance, because then if you decide, change your mind and leave the region, we've lost that money. So instead it's a carrot payment, and so we spread out our payments over 2 to 3 years. And what we decided to do is make the payments on a quarter-end basis. So when a recipient gets the award, we give them a little window, 120 days to move back home, prove they've established residency and have a job. And then at the end of a business quarter, we make a partial payment. The theory there is for at least a couple of years, we really want to relieve the tuition debt payment of our recipients. So we try to make it enough to make it worthwhile. That's why we started out with $10,000, it's now up to $15,000. But we really stretch out those payments to try and give the recipients a cushion, allows them to move home, maybe pay to put a down payment on a house or get some other bills paid off, get their feet on the ground while we take over their debt payments for a couple of years. And we pay directly to the loan holder, which for us so far has always been the federally backed loan. If a recipient changes their mind, if they move out of our county, then they forfeit all future award payments. And there is a signed contract to that effect before payments begin. For us, there was really no other practical way we were going to hold them accountable. As I said, we quickly ruled out the idea of paying them up front, because then if they leave, you're faced with chasing them down or taking them to court, and that's not a battle we wanted to fight. Right off the bat, though, in the very first year, we had more applications than we could fund. So our selection committee has become very careful and choosy about who they pick to receive this award. And as most of you can relate to, no matter the size of your foundation, if you're writing a check of $10,000 to $15,000 as a scholarship, that's a pretty good chunk of money. So we've become very selective in who gets our awards. And again, how it runs, pretty much like a competitive scholarship program. The key, though, it's hard to say there's a cycle, right? Because we're not sure when the young woman or the young man is in Austin, Texas, or Chicago, or the Carolinas. You can't predict when they're going to reach a point in their life where they decided either they're going to stay in the Carolinas or they've met someone and they want to move back home and start a family. You can't predict when that's going to happen. So we have a year-round application program, and then the committee meets as necessary. We require face-to-face interviews for all the finalists. And that's sometimes hard to schedule, but we want to see these people face-to-face, get a sense for what they're bringing back to the community. And so that's part of our decision process. We give them a 120-day grace period, like I said, to move back home and start work. One key element, and I'll get on this a little bit later with the legal part, you may not already be living in our county at the time you apply or at the time we select you. You may already be working in our county, that's fine. But if you're already living here, you've defeated the economic purpose of luring you back home to live and work. So that's a key differentiating factor. We're a little flexible on the 120-day grace period, and that's kind of an arbitrary number. But here's where it gets interesting in the selection process. We make decisions based on how we perceive someone's going to contribute to the community. What's their impact going to be? And I've given you an example, and this has played out. We have turned down applicants who said they're going to come home, move back home, but they're not sure what they're going to do, and they're going to live with mom and dad. That's not the economic impact we're looking for in this kind of program. And so we've turned those kind of applications down. This is an economic stimulus. Our ideal candidate, and you're going to hear it from Chelsea later, is a candidate that's going to come home, buy a house, or move downtown to one of our downtowns, rent a condo or a loft downtown, be involved in the community, contribute to the growth and prosperity. So it's an interesting process as we evaluate candidates. But we're clear on what we're looking for. We try to make the candidates clear that this will come into play.
Randy, before you move on to the next slide, there's a couple questions about kind of the logistics of paying directly to the loan holder.
Yep.
And whether the funding has to be used for tuition and loan reimbursement. So can you touch on that a little bit more?
I certainly will. So first, yes, we pay directly to the loan holder. And again, those for all of our recipients so far, those are all the federally backed student loans. We never pay it directly to the recipient themselves. Now, if I haven't mentioned it yet, or if I forget to later, it is taxable income. And so our finance department has to notify them at year end of their income because it is taxable. Andrea's question about does the funding have to be used for tuition loan reimbursement? Yes. However, we did have one recipient who only owed a few more $1,000, and we gave her and her husband some relocation assistance to physically move back home. You have to be careful now because, and I'm going to talk about this issue in a minute, this is not a legally recognized charitable activity. So foundations have to be very careful what you're paying for and how the money is used. Our attorneys at Clark Hill said relocation expenses is probably okay, but for now try to limit it just to student debt repayment. Jenna, would you consider granting to an individual? No, you would get in huge trouble because, again, this is an economic stimulus program, and your economic stimulus is based on we're trying to lure college graduates back home. And I'll talk about the legislative issue in a minute. But if they're already living in your county, you've defeated your economic purpose. And that creates a little bit of pushback because I got calls from people saying, well, my son already moved back home and he has debt. Why can't you help him? Because that's not a charitable activity. The Treasury Department does not recognize back-end scholarships as a charitable activity. Let me just go back to this slide here, the challenges and issue, and I touched on it there, some pushback from grads who've already moved back home. In our region, finding a job for some is still a challenge, although it's getting better all the time, especially in the right kind of fields. We've learned a lot from looking at these applications. We see students, and this is probably not a surprise to many of you, they go off and get a degree in a field and it has no real application in life. And they have $80,000 in student debt, and they can't find a job that pays them enough to pay off that debt. So degrees that don't match needs and opportunities continues to be a big problem. It's hard to get in touch with potential applicants, so social media is huge. And we've discovered that moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas, they are really the key to making sure their young people are aware of this program, because no one does a better job of keeping tabs on where their kids are than moms and dads. And like most parents or grandparents, they're eager to lure those kids back home, those young people back home. So we've created PDF flyers and postcards that we can share with people. They in turn share it. But our social media campaign, especially every time we pick a recipient, whether it's traditional newspaper coverage or Facebook or social media, we really blast that out, and that spreads throughout the country. But moms, dads, relatives, those are really the key to getting the word out about this program, because it does no good to advertise locally necessarily, because your potential applicants don't live in your area anymore. So reaching them is a problem. So let's touch on the legislative status. And this is really important for everyone on this call to pay attention to. Ironically, we can all give out front-end traditional scholarships all day long. It's charitable. The income is not taxable. You can give a full-ride scholarship to the daughter of a doctor, and it's a charitable activity. Back-end scholarships do not exist in the U.S. Treasury regulations. If they don't exist, that means the IRS doesn't know how to treat them. They are not a recognized charitable activity. For the last 2 years now, we have been holding meetings with Treasury. We've been talking to elected officials in Washington. What needs to happen next to make this a charitable activity is we need legislation introduced, hopefully by a bipartisan team in the House and or Senate, or concurrently in both. And if you want to be specific, I believe it's Treasury Section 108 of the Treasury Code, where loan forgiveness is addressed in Treasury regulations. If we can get this done, that would give blanket approval to community foundations to pursue this. It would make the income tax exempt, just like a front-end scholarship, and it would classify these programs as charitable. The first time we met with Treasury, they were actually kind of surprised that this language didn't already exist, because it's really a simple concept. I mean, if you think about it, a front-end traditional scholarship is just a way to help young people get a degree and avoid some college debt. Reverse scholarship is the same thing, just paid at a different time frame. But it's been a challenge. I will say this program is spreading. I've been kind of keeping loose track of the foundations and partners in other states, and you can see a list there that I'm aware of states that are at least exploring this. But again, until we have legislation introduced, everyone has to be really careful of how you document and prove that this is a charitable activity for you. So in our case, in our region, we literally had to prove that this was a burden of our government, our local regional government. It was a burden because we did not have enough college graduates moving back home. Once our local unit of government, working with our economic development groups, once they determined and officially agreed in a county resolution that it was a burden on our government, our foundation then was able to respond to that burden and do something to alleviate the burdens of government. And that's a very technical point that everyone needs to pay close attention to, because right now, as it exists, Columbus, Ohio, Ann Arbor, Michigan, they're not going to be allowed to do this program. You will not be able to prove in Columbus, Ohio, that a lack of college graduates is a burden on your community. And that's an important distinction. Sarah's question, are there any involvement requirements for recipients? That's a great question, Sarah. We ruled that out as a formal requirement. Some of the recipients, like Chelsea that you'll hear from in a minute, we do really encourage them to get involved, and we've asked Chelsea to speak at different things. But that's more of an informal thing. And the honest reason for that, Sarah, is our staff doesn't have time to track all these young adults and make sure they're fulfilling obligations. That was not one more layer of complexity and work that we wanted to go through. So that was just a personal choice. So here's what's next, at least for us. The reverse scholarship program was just phase one for us of redefining and reinventing all of our scholarship assets. We started this journey in 2013 or 2014, so quite a few years ago, really asking ourselves how our assets were being used, were we making a difference with scholarship funding, and stepping back and trying to understand what we were really trying to accomplish. So what's coming next and what we've launched on the heels of this reverse scholarship program is a program we're calling Complete Your Degree. It's reducing emphasis on traditional front-end scholarships, and we're trying to move away from just the concept of helping kids get into college and really being more deliberate and strategic about college success. And I know many other foundations around America are addressing this at the same time, but we're really going to make an ambitious effort over the next 3 years. We'll put about $1 million into college success programs, and most importantly, funding things above just tuition, books, and supplies. So that may be daycare, rent, transportation, whatever the case may be. So a pretty big shift. So the reverse scholarship led us to this, and this is where we're at now. Jenna's question, can they apply while they are in college? Technically, yes. So a senior in college or someone nearing their end, as long as they haven't moved back home, as long as they can prove they still live in another city, a rent payment contract, a utility, a paycheck stub, something, as long as they haven't yet moved back home, they may apply while they're still in college. The key is they've got to convince our committee that this come-home reverse scholarship incentive will lure them back home. So we haven't had that happen, but I wouldn't be surprised. Our typical recipient, and I think Chelsea can speak to this, they go to college, they leave college, they move off to a big city, they have fun, they see the world, they travel, they get to their mid to late 20s, and they realize, you know what, I'm either going to stay in this city or I'm going to move back home. So probably 99% of our applicants fit that mold to a T. They've gone away, they've seen some stuff, they've traveled, they've had fun, and now they're ready to come back home. Let's see. So Andrew, do you want to take a few more questions before we have Chelsea come on?
Yes, that'd be great.
Can a company, oh, this is a good question from Victoria. A company can get you in trouble. So we've been in talks with our hospitals because our hospitals are interested in supporting this, but a company may not give you money to support this program with an expectation that you will find recipients to move back and work in their company. That will get you in big trouble. So we are very careful as we talk to donors about this program that any corporate gifts, there is no connection whatsoever between the company that gave us the gift and the selection committee or the preference we give. You've got to have a hard, solid line between donors and the selection process, or you're going to get yourself in trouble. What sources of research are you using to show a need for a completion program? There's a few national studies out, Danielle, on gap funding or completion grants. The names of them escape me at the moment. But we are doing some peer learning and peer benchmarking of our own to move away from that traditional scholarship model of front end, maybe 1 or 2 year scholarship, to more a whole model based on college completion. And many of you many of you know the 6-year completion rate for a bachelor's degree is like 55%, 56%. That's national. That's a horrible statistic. Tiffany's question, our staff checks up on them. So, you know, we're in a small community. We check up on them on occasion to make sure they're still living and working in our region. We're not a huge city. There's no huge cities here, so it's fairly easy to keep tabs on our recipients. We don't check each quarter, but once or twice a year we'll check in with the recipient and make sure they're still living and working in the area. Robert, is the focus on postgraduates only? Not sure exactly what you mean by that, Robert. We're open to any college degree whatsoever, bachelor's, master's, PhD, but it is after graduation, yes. But no, they don't have to be working somewhere else. They can be working in our region and just commuting from another city or another county or from Detroit, right? Maybe they're tired of the commute. We want them to move back home and buy a house.
And Randy, just to note, all the participants aren't able to see the questions. Those only come into us as presenters, so just making sure we're repeating the question. And there was one that we missed a little further up from Connie. Are you providing tax forms as you expand the categories that may be covered under these scholarships?
Thank you. Yes, our finance department does provide all of those annual tax forms to the recipients, both in our new program, the Complete Your Degree, and in the Reverse Scholarship Program. Another question from Andrea, how did you raise the funds for this program? So a combination to fund this program, and our goal is to get up to about $120,000 a year in this program. We use a combination of redirecting and repurposing existing scholarships. We work with existing donors who might be interested in this kind of program, and then we go out and cultivate new donors. And that's been our model so far. All right, any more questions before I introduce Chelsea?
And let me unmute her. Chelsea,
Danielle,
are you there?
you see? Let me just.
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hi, Chelsea.
Excellent.
Hello.
Let me answer one more question, then I'll introduce you. So Danielle, wondering, did we cease front-end scholarships? No, we still do traditional front-end scholarships. Some of those will obviously continue on forever. We're just trying to be much more mindful of new dollars or repurposing existing dollars to make sure our donors are helping to fund completion and not just traditional. So we're continuing on with those. So let me tell you a little bit about Chelsea. She was our recipient number 1, an incredible young woman, a great asset back to the community. What's interesting, though, and I mentioned to some of you before Chelsea came on, we had Chelsea speak at our annual dinner a couple of years ago in front of 300 people. It's such an odd experience, especially for our donors, because most of the time when our donors criticize our scholarship programs, it's because we're paying our young people to move away and they don't come home. So our donors, our board, our friends, we don't get to meet these young people and hear from them and watch them progress in their career and life. So here we flip that upside down. We paid Chelsea to move back home. She's got married. She's settled down. But now we get to see her in our community. We get to see what our investment's doing. And when she spoke at our dinner, she just floored everybody because we were all so proud to be a part of that experience. And so it's turned the whole scholarship, donor relations, donor cultivation upside down because now they can see the recipients. They can see them in the community working and living and going to school or doing whatever. So she's been a great asset, a great advocate and spokesperson for the program. So Chelsea, why don't you give everyone your perspectives?
Thank you for that. That was glowing. Thank you so much. So, yeah, from my perspective, I mean, this was something totally unheard of. You know, I graduated from Port Huron High School in 2006 and then went off to Michigan State University, didn't have any scholarship funds. I applied for multiple scholarships, didn't get any of them. So it was just one of those things that was, you know, I thought it was a long shot. My mom is the one who, she saw the ad in the Times-Herald, I believe, the local newspaper, and encouraged me to apply for it. So because, I guess, background, I was, after Michigan State, I went to live in Northville, Michigan. I took a job at St. Joseph Mercy in Ann Arbor. So I was living in Northville with my sister. And then after that, also changed jobs to Beaumont and Royal Oak. Was living in Berkeley, which is just outside of Royal Oak. And obviously, Royal Oak is kind of like the mecca for graduates, college graduates who just come there. It's tons of stuff for young adults in the area. So I was loving it around there, but always, like I've said this phrase so many times, like I always felt the pull to come back home. Like I would spend a lot of weekends at home with my parents, and my sister was living at home for a little bit, so I was spending time with her, and that's how I met my now husband, is coming back to Port Huron to hang out, and just met him at a local watering hole. So after that, I still was living in Berkeley at the time, but I was kind of checking to see if there was any jobs. My background is medical laboratory science, so I work in the clinical laboratory in typically a hospital setting, sometimes a research setting. I've always worked in the hospital setting. So there's 2 hospitals in town, but the field it's pretty small, and these being smaller hospitals, they don't have as many employees. So, I kept checking for jobs, wasn't seeing any. Finally, something popped up, and I'm not exactly remembering the timeline of this, but I was able to take a contingent position, so just a casual, they'd call me when they need me type job, while still working full-time at Royal Oak Beaumont. So after that, my husband and I got engaged, and we were kind of trying to decide where we were going to live, whether we were going to move halfway in between so that I could continue working at Beaumont Royal Oak, or if I was going to, try to pursue a full-time position around here somewhere. So when the scholarship came up, it was a no-brainer at that point. We need to find a home in St. Clair County. So we ended up, I think the scholarship, I believe I received the scholarship in May of 2016. Does that sound right, Randy?
Yeah.
I'm not sure the time.
Yep.
Okay. And then we actually closed on our house. I think it was a month later. After my interview, I remember we had talked about it during my interview. We were purchasing our house like a month later. So the timing lined up perfectly. It was an awesome incentive to be able to, and then to not have to worry about my student loans anymore. It was incredible, and I will forever be indebted to the Community Foundation for doing this for us.
And Chelsea is graduated out of the program, so we've done
Yeah.
our 2 years of payments. And I think I told some of you maybe beforehand, we actually recruited her husband to join one of our grants committees. So it's really just been a wonderful experience for all of us.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent.
So Andrew, we'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, it looks like there were a few questions that came in over the chat. And Randy, I know you responded to some of these, but just so everyone on the webinar has the benefit of hearing the responses, if we could just go through those for a few minutes before we turn it over to Lisa. The question was, can the recipient live in your county but work in another county?
Yep, great one. So I'll do that one. So no, they may not live in the county, because our whole legal premise is that we're luring them back home to live. So they can't live here. They may work here or somewhere else, but it's the whole living thing that's critical on that one. Mm-hmm. There was a question, are recipients eligible to apply for a back-end scholarship if they received a front-end scholarship? The correct answer is yes. They can apply for the reverse scholarship whether or not they've received a front-end scholarship. There's no correlation there. If you get a front-end scholarship and 10 years later you want to move home, you're still eligible for the reverse scholarship program, so there's no correlation. This is an important one from Seth Baker. Are candidates only eligible if they were originally from your county? So this is a judgment call. Our opinion is candidates are more likely to live and stay here if they have family ties. So we give very strong preference to those with a family tie or a connection here. It's not an absolute criteria, but if we have 2 equal candidates, one with family ties here, we're going to give the family tie one because we believe it's a better investment. But it is open to anyone. Another question, were you able to use a large portion of existing scholarship endowments for the program? No. So, Paul, we did a complete audit of all of our scholarship funds. Unfortunately, and we are changing this, but unfortunately, too many of our contracts stipulated graduating high school seniors or within the first 2 years of college. Going forward, as we modify all of our scholarship theories and programs and contracts, we're writing contracts now that are much more open-ended. Because as we've talked to donors and explained what we're trying to do, whether it's college completion or college coming home, they just want to help young people be successful. But unfortunately, a lot of our contracts were too restrictive in how we can use them. Let's see. Another question about any restrictions. Not in terms of what kind of work they do here or what else they do. As long as they're working full-time, ideally, and living in the county, those are the only restrictions we have. If they take a job out of the county, if they move out of the county, they're going to forfeit all future payments. Did I catch them all, Andrea?
And there was a clarifying question about the amount, and is it $15,000 total or not? Is it $15,000 total, not annually? What is the average amount of debt, and does the $15,000 make an impact?
All right, so yeah, great question. So we started out the program. Awards were up to $10,000 at our committee's discretion. And again, that $10,000 award is paid out over the course of, say, 2 years on a quarterly basis. However, here's where it gets really depressing. So we've been keeping track of all of our applicants, and I want to say we probably have 40 applicants. The average debt we're seeing is about $80,000. Now, nationally, if you Google national averages on college debt, they're going to tell you it's about $32,000. I don't know where they're getting those numbers because the numbers we're seeing are astronomical. So we did two things. We went back to our board, our main board, and we said we want to expand the time frame of recent college grads from 7 years up to 10 years because it's taking so long to pay off debt. And we want permission to increase awards on a case-by-case basis up to $15,000 if necessary. I think based on your region, you have to use an educated guess as to how much money it takes to be an attractive incentive. Our guiding principle is that for the 2 years we are making your payments or the 3 years we are making your payments, we want to be able to make most or all of your monthly debt payments, right? We really want to give these young people a break for a couple of years, let them do other things, let them get on their feet. So it's got to be enough to make a difference. But that's an arbitrary decision as to how much you think you need to offer. A question about, can you explain where the money came from? So we repurposed some existing scholarship funds. We did that audit. We found some that we could repurpose. Then we went to other scholarship donors and asked them if they would add new funds to it or set up a new fund for this program, and that worked. And then we just cultivated brand new donors right out of the blue. And the response so far has been phenomenal. A question, how do you verify their debt? We make them show us their loan statements. And then you can verify that online. So we keep close tabs on the debt. If a recipient is married, do you give only one reverse scholarship per family? That's a great question, and actually we selected or interviewed several spouses. Because we don't have enough money, we've tended just to support one of them, but it would not be out of the realm of possibility where a husband and wife team could both get a reverse scholarship from us. That's absolutely possible. It's just a judgment call.
And then there was one question, could you share examples of contracts that are more open-ended?
I'd be happy to. If someone wants to email me or Andrea, I don't know if I could share them with you and you could send them out.
Mm-hmm. I can send them out.
Yeah, it was very interesting as we audited all of our fund contracts, and some of them date back to the 1980s. They were just poorly written, too restrictive. Now, at the time, they probably sounded fine, but in light of the world today, we're dramatically changing how we write contracts now.
Great. Thank you, Randy. So I see a few more questions trickling in, but we will have more time at the end. I want to shift over to Lisa. So thank you to Randy and Chelsea for your presentations. Definitely thank you, Chelsea, for taking the time out this afternoon to be with us.
Yeah, of course.
And so now I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Well, you see there on the map where we're located, so we're Michigan's neighbor to the south, and I first learned about these Come Home scholarships or reverse scholarships through one of these TriState webinars back in 2016. And I got in touch with Randy and through mostly emails and I think one or two phone conversations, he sort of guided me through the process based on what they had done in St. Clair, and we rolled out this program in 2017. The similarities and documents that are
Lisa,
almost identical. Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but can you get a little closer to the mic and speak up? We're having some trouble hearing you.
Sure, I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yep, it is.
Okay. The information that we gathered under Randy's guidance included census information that showed we had a lower level, educational level than the state average, and also that our county was in a state of economic decline. We had our county commissioners draw up a resolution showing their support of this program and that it would lessen the burdens of government. Our board did approve a Come Home scholarship policy so we could implement the program. And Randy had shared with us St. Clair's attorney's opinion on this program, and that we did have our attorney review it, but we did not see the need to have an attorney draw up a new one, as this was an IRS approval issue, which is national and not a state-by-state issue. So once we had all that in hand, as far as any differences that we did from St. Clair, I can really only think of a couple small ones. One is that we plan to offer the Come Home scholarships to include also certificates in skilled trades. So for example, we know of a couple employers here that are in desperate need of welders. And so if you don't live here and you have gotten your certificate as a welder, we would also be willing to work with you and accept that as payment if you were going to return here to live and work. And secondly, I think we might have done our funding slightly different in that we only did pursue new donors. The first donor, we were very blessed, actually came to us because they heard we were working on this program. And it was a local bank who wanted to have the naming rights on the very first Come Home Scholarship Fund. And so right now we have enough funding to start with 2 for our first year. Any barriers or challenges, I was asked. Those really were minimal, but they were similar to the ones that Randy brought up. You're always going to have some graduates who move back to your community before they learned about this program, and they want to apply, and then they're upset when they find out that they're not eligible. I also had a parent who argued that he and his wife had worked very hard to put their son through college, that the son had earned several scholarships, worked part-time jobs, and they were proud that he graduated without college debt. And now they were wishing he would move home, and there was no financial incentive to get him to move home. So you're always going to have those kind of complaints as you're working on this. It's interesting that Randy was talking about the debt being so high because there are so many resources out there. It depends on which one you're reading. One of our board members was worried at first that $10,000 was not going to be enough of an incentive to get someone to move. And at that time, there was an article out that I found by Robert Hilton Smith, and it was called Small Loans, Big Risks, Major Consequences for Student Debtors. And according to that article, half of people who had college debt, it was less than $16,400. So that was one of the articles I had pointed out to my board to say, I think $10,000 would be a huge incentive if your average debt is $16,000. So I'm not sure exactly which of those articles or stats is correct. Just before we were ready to roll out this program, I asked Randy if you would do anything different. If you were starting this program all over again, what would you do differently? And he told me he would call it something different and not call it reverse scholarships because it helps prevent confusion. So from the very beginning, we decided to go with the Come Home Scholarship nomenclature. The marketing of the program is challenging, as Randy mentioned before. We also use social media. We did some PDF flyers that we shared with local businesses. And then we also wrote a letter telling about the Come Home Scholarship program and sent it to all of our prior scholarship winners who had won traditional scholarships with us, who were in that time frame right now where they would qualify for a Come Home Scholarship. And so now we're into 2018, and where are we now? Well, so far we have had 5 applicants. So far none of them have been eligible because they were people who had already moved back after college. However, there is one that was just a little ahead of himself. He will be eligible once he completes graduation. And then we've had another one who has called to inquire about the Come Home Scholarship, and we know he's going to be applying in 2018. So assuming those 2 apply, I do anticipate we'll be giving out 2 of these awards this year. One of those is in school studying to be a chiropractor, and he wants to return and take over his father's chiropractic business. The other one he's majoring in economics and business, and he's already done 2 internships at one of our large employers, Ohio Mutual Insurance Group. And so he wants to return and hopefully find a place with them. So that's all nice, and that's been a lot of good collaboration within our community as well. I just wanted to add, when Randy mentioned the whole Complete Your Degree program, this inspired us to do the same. And so our scholarship and our donor intent, as far as our newer scholarship funds that have come since we started this, we are also shifting away from awarding only to high school graduating seniors. And we are trying to make sure all our new scholarships include non-traditional students who've been out of high school a while or maybe started college and never finished and want to go back. And we are trying to make all of our scholarships renewable. So once somebody is in, they're eligible to apply for a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year's funding. And I also just wanted to mention that even though this isn't a charitable activity recognized by the IRS as of yet, I did have an opportunity to speak face-to-face with the woman who is an attorney for the Council on Foundations who is in charge of national standards. And she did tell me that so far the IRS had not really even raised an eyebrow, that they do see what we're trying to do out here. So I think as long as you follow the guidelines that Randy mentioned and you're truly working on economic development within your community, you should be okay. And I think that's it, Andrea.
Great. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
So a few more questions have come in, and this one is for both you, Lisa, and Randy. Did you cease creating new front-end scholarships to pursue this format?
No, we did not. In our situation, what we try to get donors to do is make these scholarships available to both. So high school graduating seniors and non-traditional students can apply and compete for these scholarships, new scholarships.
Yeah, same for us. I would say that over the last couple of years we've had no new traditional set up because now donors are choosing to either give to our Complete Your Degree College Success Program or they're putting it into the pot for the Come Home Reverse Scholarship.
Great. A question about the permissions from the IRS. Do you have to keep that permission updated with a new letter each year?
That's a great question. So we have not sought IRS permission. We ruled that out several years ago. We went the route of a legal opinion based on the facts and circumstances and the burden of government we face. So that's our backup defense. However, as Andrew just said, we've met twice now in Washington, D.C. with the top officials and lawyers for the U.S. Treasury Department. Although they can't speak on record, they think this is a no-brainer. They've been very open that they're looking for language to be put into Treasury regulations, which then dictate to the IRS. But we have not sought IRS's permission. However, we include this in our audit. The Treasury knows we're doing this. The Council on Foundations has not been shy. The Council of Michigan Foundation has not been shy. Everyone knows this is happening, but we do at some point need legislation.
Mm-hmm. All right. Another question, can a donor establish a come-home scholarship with any criteria specific to a field of study, such as engineering?
For us, that would be a yes. What about you, Lisa?
Probably. That hasn't even come up yet, so I'm not sure how our committee would feel, but probably yes.
Okay, great. So the last question that we have right now is about other shared documents, marketing materials, etc. So I'm going to jump to this next slide and share with you all to let you know that in the follow-up email that you will receive, and I will also get the contract samples that Randy said he'd be willing to share. But I do want to let you know you will receive a copy of the talent retention manual. I think it was also in your webinar. There was a link in your webinar reminder from CMF at least. But just a note that all of you will get that link within the next day or so. And this is the manual, just to confuse things even more with a third name for this model. When we were putting this manual together a few years ago, the lawyers that were working on it wanted to get away from using the word scholarship at all. They were concerned that there would be some pushback and confusion around that. So that is why it's called the Talent Retention Manual, but I can assure you that it is this model. And it has a number of different sections in it. Randy, his story and the history and how the concept took place was in there. The Huron County Community Foundation also did some initial work on this. And there's a Q&A with their CEO as well. And then there are the sample agreement and the sample, the letter, the opinion that was created. So it goes through all of those steps and talks about the implementation and everything. So you will receive that, and I think it's a very helpful manual. And they'll also make sure that you get a copy of the original webinar, which happened in 2016. In case you weren't on that webinar, you'll receive a copy of that recording with that manual, and it walks through it. And then the lawyers were on there, and they answered some of these very technical questions. So that will be helpful for those of you who are really early in this process and learning more about it. And then, Randy, there was a specific question. Do you have any marketing PDFs or marketing materials that you would be willing to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Either through you or if people just shoot me an email, I'll send some material back. Okay.
I will share Randy's email in the follow-up as well. But Randy, if you can send me, or is it all on your website?
Yep. Under our contact section, you can get right to my email.
Yep. So I will send you Randy's email, and then also a link to the Community Foundation's websites where I know that this information is on there as well. And then I'll gather any other materials. If you want to send that to me, Randy, I'll put one big email together for everyone. Okay, excellent. I don't see any other questions. So thank you to Randy and Lisa for sharing your experiences, and I'm sure that you will both be getting some follow-up questions from your peers. I see we have a great turnout today from this program, so I appreciate you sharing this knowledge far and wide. And thank you all for joining us today and for considering taking on this, this concept, bringing it to your community. As I mentioned, you will receive an email. I do have to edit this recording, so it might just take a day or so to get that out to you, but you will receive an email with the recording, the manual, recording of the original webinar, and anything else I can gather. And in that email, there will also be an evaluation. We do hope that you will take a few minutes to complete that just so we can get your feedback on what you liked, what you might change on this webinar, or any other ideas or things that you're looking for future programs. Speaking of future programs, we do have 2 upcoming in the TriState series that you might be interested. The first is on March 7th, and this will be around civic engagement and community convening. And then on April 11th, there will be a great program on another interesting concept that's coming up through Community Foundations on children's savings accounts. So thank you again for spending the afternoon with us, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.